The drums began before sunrise. They were not war drums, not festival drums, not the deep ceremonial thunder used when a new moon was born above the violet seas of Vera Prime. These were narrower, colder beats, judgment rhythms, played only when the Empire wanted every citizen to remember one thing: a throne could forgive almost anything, but it would never forgive a failure of blood. Princess Elira stood barefoot in the hall of glass, her hands open at her sides, while 7 judges in mirrored masks sat in a crescent before her. Above them, 1,000 crystal threads hung from the ceiling, catching dawn light and splitting it into fractured rainbows that painted her skin in shifting scars of color. Once, as a child, she had thought this hall was beautiful. Today, it looked like a cage made from frozen lightning. The High Matron's voice echoed from behind a silver veil. Elira Solan Vale, first daughter of Emperor Kadrin IV, by decree of the Continuity Codex, you stand accused of dynastic nullity. Dynastic nullity. A legal phrase polished smooth by centuries of cruelty. It meant what every whisper in the palace already said. Barren, the chamber murmured. Elira did not. 3 years of examinations. 3 years of tinctures, ritual medicines, neural alignments, fertility immersions in sacred springs, and private physicians who spoke softly while writing final judgments in hard black ink. 3 years since her arranged bond to House Tryon had been announced, only for the house to withdraw with regret, as if she were a treaty draft with typographical errors. The Empire had turned her body into a public argument. The High Matron raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. According to law, an heir unable to continue the solar line may be stripped of succession and reassigned under diplomatic utility provision. Elira lifted her chin. Reassigned, say the word you mean. The judges shifted. Even veiled, the High Matron stiffened. Elira spoke again, clear enough for the gallery to hear. Gifted. No one corrected her. From the upper platform, her father watched without expression. Emperor Kedron wore the crown of living alloy, a ring of metal that flowed like slow mercury around his temples, and his face was carved into the same impassive elegance stamped on every imperial coin. He looked less like her father and more like the Empire pretending to be a person. At his side stood Chancellor Vorun, thin as a blade and twice as cold. Provision identified, Vorun said. Recipient, Human Protectorate Outpost 12, planet designation Earth. The gallery erupted. Earth was a border world, a rising one, yes, but still spoken of in court tones reserved for useful storms and unpredictable predators. Humans were admired in military briefings, mocked in etiquette circles, feared in private. A barren imperial princess sent to a human, it was punishment disguised as diplomacy. Elira waited for her father to object. He did not. Instead, he stood and delivered judgment himself. By imperial seal, Elira Solan Vale is removed from succession, assigned as cultural envoy to Human Protectorate Outpost 12, and stripped of dynastic claim pending future review. Pending future review, a phrase even crueler than finality. It meant, we may take you back if you become useful again. The drums stopped. And in the ringing silence, Elira bowed, not to the judges, not to the throne, but to the people in the gallery, the maids and guards and clerks and junior officers who had watched her grow up and now watched her break. Then she turned and walked out of the hall of glass without permission. One Earth did not smell like Vera. Vera smelled like ionized rain, polished stone, and ceremonial incense. Earth, when Elira stepped off the transport in New Carthage spaceport, smelled like coffee, engine fuel, wet asphalt, sea wind, and something warm and yeasty from a bakery 2 streets over. It smelled alive and completely uninterested in imperial etiquette. Outpost 12 sat on a cliff above a gray-blue ocean, white buildings stitched together with steel walkways, solar panels, and stubborn flowers growing in every crack they could find. No crystal towers. No gold banners. No servants lining corridors with eyes lowered, just people in jumpsuits running late and laughing while they did it. A man in a weather-beaten coat waited at the bottom of the ramp holding a tablet and a paper cup. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, maybe mid-30s, with a face that looked like it had learned to smile through bad weather. Princess Elira, he asked. She let the title hang in the air like an awkward guest. For administrative purposes only, she said. He grinned. Fair. I'm Commander Elias Ward, welcome to Outpost 12. He offered his hand. Varen nobles did not touch strangers on first meeting. Elira hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm and firm, no kneeling, no theatrical reverence, no covert contempt, just practical courtesy as if she were a colleague arriving for shift change. He glanced at her single luggage case. That all you brought? That is all I was permitted to keep. Then we'll get you what you need. No pity, no scandalized gasp. Just solution. She disliked him instantly for making kindness look easy. Outpost 12 gave her a room with an ocean-facing window, a desk, a small shelf of translated human literature, and a card key that malfunctioned twice before dinner. No one assigned her a personal staff. No one announced her arrival at meals. If she wanted tea, she had to make tea. The first week felt like falling downstairs in slow motion. She attended cultural briefings. She was meant to lead and discovered humans asked questions in ways Varens considered impolite and therefore never asked at all. Why does your empire tie succession to fertility? What happens to non-heirs with infertility? How many medical sources were independent from state oversight? Did you have the right to refuse treatment? Elira answered with the polished evasions she had been trained to use, then returned to her room and stared at the ceiling until dawn. On the 9th day, she found Commander Ward in the machine bay fixing a desalination pump with 2 engineers and a mechanic covered in grease up to his elbows. "You are the outpost commander," she said. "Why are you doing manual repairs?" Elias glanced up. "Because the pump doesn't care about rank." The mechanic snorted, "And because he cross-threaded it last time." "I told you that in confidence," Elias said. Elira folded her arms, trying not to smile. "You are all very informal." The engineer shrugged. "Water's formal enough for all of us." She should have left. Instead, she stayed, watching them work, asking careful questions she pretended were diplomatic. By the time they finished, her sleeves had oil on them and she had learned the human term "good enough for now," which seemed to govern half their civilization. That night she slept 4 uninterrupted hours for the first time since exile. 2. The message came on a rain-heavy afternoon. Encrypted channel, Imperial seal. Priority immediate. Elira read it twice, then a third time. Her pulse went cold. She found Elias in the outpost kitchen attempting to cook something that looked like a negotiation between eggs and regret. "What happened?" he asked, seeing her face. She handed him the tablet. He read in silence. When he finished, he set the tablet down very carefully. "They're claiming you're not merely infertile," he said. "They're claiming you carry a hereditary genomic collapse marker. If true, they can nullify your entire bloodline's legitimacy retroactively." Elira nodded once. The Continuity Codex had a hidden clause known mostly to legal historians and political assassins. If a solar heir's line carried catastrophic genomic instability, then rival branches could invoke emergency succession correction, which meant this was no medical update. It was a coup in paperwork. "Who benefits?" Elias asked. "House Tryon, Chancellor Vorun. Anyone who wants my father isolated and dependent." She looked out through the kitchen window at rain striking the courtyard in silver needles. "They don't just want me gone, they want me discredited so completely that no one can use my name against them." Elias wiped his hands on a towel. "Then we don't let them." Elira gave a hollow laugh. "With what? My word, the Empire already chose what to believe. Then we use evidence they can't bury." She turned to him slowly. "Barren medical archives are sealed by throne authority." "Maybe on Vera," he said, "but you're not on Vera." The legal maze was obscene. Imperial records were mirrored to diplomatic vaults by treaty. Outpost 12 had one such vault, supposedly read-only access for cultural continuity. Buried in protocols no one had used in 18 years were raw genomic audit logs from succession screenings, stored as encrypted parity backups for cross-civilizational data integrity. Elira had never seen these logs. Nobles received conclusions, never process. For 6 days she and Elias worked in a secure lab with Dr. Myra Chen, the outpost's lead bioinformatician, and Lieutenant Omar Reyes from cybersecurity. They slept in shifts and argued over coffee that tasted like burnt metal and determination. The logs, once reconstructed, told a different story. Elira's fertility markers were not collapsed, they had been altered. Not in her body, in the reported outputs. A selective distortion in the Imperial diagnostic pipeline introduced after her final palace screening, subtle enough to survive basic audits, precise enough to fake dynastic nullity and the catastrophic marker. Someone had rewritten the verdict, not the genome. Myra leaned back from the hollow display, eyes wide. "This is surgical. Whoever did this knew the Imperial medical stack inside out." Reyes swore quietly. There's a signature ghost here. Fragments of admin token paths linked to the Chancellor's office cluster. Elira felt the room tilt, not because she was surprised, because she was not surprised. For years she had felt the shape of betrayal without touching it, now it had coordinates. Elias looked at her. We can package this for tribunal review. Elira shook her head. No, a tribunal on Vera will delay debate and quietly erase. By the time process finishes, Vorun will have crowned someone else. Then what? She inhaled, tasting fear like copper. We go home. 3. No one in the command council liked the plan. Return to Imperial space with evidence accusing the sitting Chancellor of genomic fraud, said Captain Amani Akafer, head of security. That's not diplomacy, that's lighting a flare inside a fuel tank. Accurate metaphor, Elias said, still necessary. Myra slid a data wafer across the table. We've built triple-proof chains. Raw logs check some continuity, cross-signed backups from 3 independent human systems plus treaty timestamps predating the alleged update. Unless they physically destroy every node at once, this survives. Omar added, and I seeded Deadman packets in 6 legal repositories across neutral worlds. If we go dark, it auto-publishes. Elira looked around the room at people who owed her nothing and were risking everything. Why? She asked quietly. Why do this for me? Captain Akafer met her gaze. Because if a government can rewrite your biology to control succession, it can rewrite anyone. Today it's your throne, tomorrow it's our treaties. Truth isn't charity, princess, it's infrastructure. Elias nodded. Also, you're one of us now. The words hit harder than any speech in the Hall of Glass ever had. One of us, not air, not embarrassment, not diplomatic utility, belonging offered without ceremony. Elira looked down at her hands, steady for the first time in months. Then let's build a return packet, she said. They departed under official protocol, cultural envoy returning for mid-cycle court renewal with human escort for treaty observance. Legal, boring, deniable. The ship HCS Resolute Dawn slipped through jump lanes toward Vera Prime while Elira prepared for war in the only way left, testimony. Elias found her in the observation deck dictating a statement. You should sleep, he said. Sleep implies ignorance. I remember that luxury. He leaned against the bulkhead, stars bent and unbent outside like threads in dark silk. You're not alone this time, she gave him a tired smile. You keep saying things as if they're simple. Some things are. Like what? Like this, they lied about you, we prove it, end of story. Elira laughed softly. That is not how empires work. No, he said, but it's how pressure works. You keep applying it until something cracks. She studied him. On Vera, people speak in layers. Every sentence has hidden knives. Elias shrugged. On Earth, we still have knives. We just stop pretending they're decorative. For the first time in weeks, she laughed like she meant it. 4 Vera Prime rose from shadow like a polished bruise, violet oceans, silver cloud bands, cities glittering along coastlines in geometric perfection. When their shuttle landed in the Imperial Spire docking ring, reception protocol awaited. Honor guard, anthem, controlled smiles. Her father did not come. Chancellor Vorun did. He stood at the end of the corridor in white ceremonial armor, hands folded, expression composed into concern. Princess Elira, he said, how welcome your return is in these delicate times. She bowed fractionally. Chancellor. His eyes slid briefly to Elias and the human delegation. Commander Ward. Earth's loyalty to stability is appreciated. Elias returned a diplomatic smile with exactly 0 warmth. We're fond of accurate records. Vorun's mouth twitched. Of course. In that instant, Elira knew 2 things. He understood why they were here, and he thought he could still win. The emergency court convened by dusk, not in the Hall of Glass, but in the Chamber of Continuance, a round amphitheater where succession disputes were decided before representatives of all great houses. Thousands watched in person. Millions streamed remotely. Elira stood at the center dais in formal black with no jeweled rank collar by her own choice. Elias stood behind and to her right with the human legal envoy, Ambassador Lion Morno. Across the circle, Vorun stood beneath house banners flanked by legal ministers. At the highest balcony sat Emperor Kadrin, silent and unreadable. Chief Adjudicator Surin opened proceedings. By petition under Continuity Emergency Review, we hear claims regarding Princess Elira Solon Vale's dynastic status and the integrity of imperial medical adjudication. Vorun spoke first, elegant and grave. Honored court, this is a tragic misunderstanding amplified by foreign interference. The princess's condition was determined by certified physicians under lawful protocol. Her exile pardon diplomatic reassignment was lawful and compassionate. The new claims rely on alien technical interpretations of sovereign data. Alien, not human, a deliberate word choice to make outsiders sound contaminated. Elira stepped forward. Then let us use your own data. She signaled Myra remotely. A hollow lattice unfolded above the chamber, streams of audit logs, timestamp chains, signature hashes, access token paths. Complex, beautiful, ruthless. Ambassador Morneau spoke clearly for the court and the public stream. These records originate from Imperial Mirror backups created under Treaty 7 Delta 18 months prior to the final diagnosis. They were cross-verified against Outpost parity archives with treaty-preserved checksums. The final diagnosis packet was altered after source generation. Murmurs surged through the amphitheater. Vorun lifted a hand. Technical theatrics. Authenticity remains unproven. Rays appeared via secure link projected overhead. I'm Lieutenant Omar Reyes, Outpost 12 Cybersecurity. We traced modification vectors through administrative relay pathways linked to the Chancellor's oversight cluster. Not conclusive by pathway alone, so we performed key fragment recovery from log decay sectors. Result, cryptographic residue matching subkeys issued to Chancellor-level authority. He paused. Someone with top-tier access edited the outputs. The gallery exploded into noise. Chief Adjudicator hammered for silence. Vorun's face remained controlled, but a pulse beat visibly in his temple. He turned toward the Emperor. Your Majesty, with respect, we cannot allow foreign officers to dictate imperial legitimacy. Then Elira did the one thing no one expected. She dismissed the hollow. Silence snapped down. She looked not at Vorun, not at the judges, but at the citizens filling the galleries. When I was 13, she said, voice carrying unamplified, my tutor told me the continuity codex existed to protect us from chaos, that bloodline rules only by trust and trust only survives when truth survives. She breathed once. For 3 years, I believed I had failed my people. I accepted shame I did not earn. I watched alliances collapse, servants whisper, strangers pity me in corridors that used to feel like home. Her gaze hardened. You did that to me with code. No one moved. She turned to her father in the balcony. And you let it happen. A shockwave of whispers passed through the chamber. Emperor Kedron stood slowly. For a moment, Elira thought she had miscalculated everything. Then he spoke. Bring me the source records, not to his guards, to her. Elira blinked. Myra transmitted the raw packet directly to Imperial Judicial Systems, mirrored live on public channels before anyone could intercept. The Emperor read in silence while the chamber waited in suspended breath. When he looked up, something in his face had changed, not softened, not broken, but stripped of ceremonial distance. Chancellor Vorun, he said, voice like iron dragged across stone, did you authorize medical data alteration in succession adjudication? Vorun bowed deeply. I protected the Empire. Answer, a thin smile almost sad. Yes. The chamber detonated. What followed was not dramatic. It was administrative, which was worse. Vorun was arrested under continuity treason provisions. House Tryon delegates attempted procedural delay and were overruled by emergency majority. 3 ministers fainted, 2 fled, 1 denounced everyone and was removed by security. By midnight, the Empire had entered constitutional shock. By dawn, the feeds called it the proof session. Elira did not sleep. She stood on a private balcony overlooking the city's mirrored towers, watching aerial lanes flicker like electric rivers. Elias joined her with 2 steaming cups of tea, Barren style somehow. You're trending across 6 systems, he said. She accepted the cup, a horrifying sentence. He leaned on the railing beside her. You did it. We did it, he nodded. Fair. Wind lifted a strand of her silver hair. Do you know what frightens me most? She asked. That this isn't over, she exhaled. That they were willing to burn a person to stabilize a throne, not even out of hate, out of strategy. Elias was quiet for a moment. Humans did that too, he said. Still do sometimes. Difference is whether enough people refuse to call it normal. She looked at him sideways. And what if they do? Then you build systems that make refusal easier. He smiled faintly. You're good at systems. Elira stared out at the city she had once believed unchangeable. Maybe she was. 6. The official restoration ceremony was scheduled for 3 days later. Elira refused it. Instead, she requested a public forum, open floor, mixed citizens, no pre-screened questions, no curated applause. Advisors screamed. She insisted. The emperor, perhaps from guilt or pragmatism, approved. The forum filled beyond capacity. Students, laborers, house delegates, off-world merchants, technicians, parents with children on their shoulders. The first question came from a dockworker with scarred hands. "Are you taking your place back?" Elira stood at the center platform in plain gray. "I am reclaiming my name," she said. "The place is negotiable." A young noble asked, "Will you prosecute the physicians? Those who knowingly collaborated, yes, those coerced, we protect." An elder woman in servant livery spoke without trembling. "If you become heir again, what changes?" Elira paused. Then answered the question she had been quietly answering for herself since Earth. Succession screening will be separated from throne control and moved to an independent medical authority with public audit rights. The hall rustled with surprise. Dynastic legitimacy will no longer be tied to fertility capacity. Leadership is service, not reproduction. Now the rustle became a roar. House conservatives looked scandalized. Workers looked stunned. Students looked electrified. Elira raised a hand. And the Continuity Codex will include bodily autonomy protections. No mandated treatment, ever. Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping, then another, then dozens, then thousands. By the end, even some who hated the reforms were clapping because not clapping had become louder. Afterward, imperial analysts called her reckless. Public data called her inevitable. 7. The private meeting with her father happened at last. No court, no guards. Just the emperor and his daughter in the old observatory where, when she was 7, he had taught her the names of moons. He stood by the star map table, suddenly older without an audience. "I failed you," he said before she could speak. The simplicity of it nearly undid her. She had prepared speeches, accusations, defenses, all of them dissolved. "You did," she said. He closed his eyes briefly. "I told myself I was preserving stability. That intervention would fracture the houses. That procedure had to run its course." He laughed once bitterly. Procedure was the weapon. Elira set her hands on the star map's edge. "I needed a father, you sent an emperor." He nodded, accepting the blow. "I don't ask forgiveness, only this: help me dismantle what allowed this." She studied him, searching for theater, finding tired sincerity. "Not as your heir," she said, "as your witness." "Agreed," she inhaled slowly. "And if I walk away from succession entirely?" His jaw tightened, then eased. "Then I will grieve and I will sign." She believed him. It was not absolution, but it was a beginning. 8 months passed. Reforms moved like glaciers until suddenly they moved like storms. The Independent Biocivic Authority was established with mixed species oversight. The fertility clause was suspended, then struck. Mandatory dynastic treatment ended. Whistleblower protections expanded. The phrase Barren heir vanished from legal vocabulary and lingered only in history classes and bad faith talk shows. Elira split her time between Vera and Earth, building audit frameworks with Myra, legal transparency protocols with Ambassador Morno, and cybersecurity standards with Reyes, who still complained every meeting needed fewer poets and more firewalls. Elias remained her anchor and favorite irritation. One evening on Earth, they sat on the outpost roof watching satellites blink overhead while engineers below argued cheerfully about battery load. "You ever think about what happens if you'd stayed?" he asked. "On Vera, no, in that version of yourself who believed their verdict." Elira watched a cargo shuttle cross the horizon like a bright insect. "She would have learned to be small," she said, very gracefully. He nodded. "I'm glad she didn't." She glanced at him. "So am I." Silence settled, companionable. Then Elias said, "There's one thing I've never asked." Dangerous preface, he smiled. "Were you ever actually infertile?" Elira leaned back on her hands and looked at the stars. "I might be," she said. "I might not. That was never the point." He considered that, then grinned. "Right answer." "No," she said softly, "just the true one." 9 a year after the proof session, Vera held the first open succession charter assembly in its history. Delegates from every house, labor syndicates, medical guilds, colony worlds, and treaty partners met in a transparent dome above the capital C. Drones carried live feeds across the empire. Elira took the podium last. No crown, no rank collar, just a dark suit, a thin silver thread at the cuff, the only remnant of old titles she still wore. She spoke for 12 minutes, about trust as infrastructure, about bodies as sovereign, about power that must be auditable or it will become predatory. About exile as a weapon and belonging as resistance. Near the end, she said, they called me Barren as if worth could be measured by inheritance potential, but leadership is not the ability to produce heirs. Leadership is the willingness to protect people you may never meet from harms you will never personally suffer. The dome held its breath, then the delegates stood, not all, but enough. The charter passed by a margin large enough to matter and small enough to remind everyone democracy is never tidy. Reporters called it a revolution. Elira called it maintenance overdue by centuries. 10 late that night, after the votes and interviews and ceremonial exhaustion, Elira returned to the Hall of Glass alone. No judges, no drums, no gallery. Moonlight poured through the crystal threads, painting the floor in broken color. She walked to the center where she had once stood accused. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she spoke quietly into the empty air. I was never your failure. Her voice echoed once, then disappeared into the crystals. A door hissed open behind her. Elias stepped in, hands in pockets, pretending not to intrude. Security said I'd find you here. Security says many things. He approached and looked around. Still a dramatic room. Vera never does anything halfway. He tilted his head. You okay? Elira thought about the year behind her, the exile, the lab nights, the trial, her father's confession, the charter vote, the people who had risked careers and safety to insist facts were facts. She thought about how pain remained true even when purpose grew around it. I'm not finished, she said. Elias smiled. Good, I'd hate for the story to end. She looked at him, amused. It doesn't. He extended a hand, same as the first day at the shuttle ramp. Come on, envoy. There's a bakery on level 3 that closes in 20 minutes. They have those sea salt honey rolls you pretend not to like. She accepted his hand. I do not pretend. You absolutely pretend. They walked out together, footsteps fading down the empty corridor while dawn began to pale the horizon beyond the palace glass. Behind them, the Hall of Judgment stood silent. Ahead of them, somewhere between empire and outpost, between throne and workshop, between bloodline and chosen family, a different future kept assembling itself, one verified log, one stubborn reform, one human laugh, and one alien heartbeat at a time. And if history ever tried to compress her into a cautionary tale, barren princess, exiled daughter, restored heir, Elira knew exactly what she would hand it in return: proof, not of fertility, of fraud survived, of systems changed. Of a woman once traded as diplomatic utility who came back with evidence sharp enough to cut a throne and compassion strong enough to rebuild the room afterward. That was the truth no empire could deny. And this time, the record was public.